Disclaimer: this story is based on real-life experiences shared for storytelling and entertainment purposes. All names and identifying details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. Viewer discretion is advised. It all started on a Friday evening I didn't think would be anything out of the ordinary. My husband had asked me to accompany him to a small office gathering, nothing too fancy, just a wrap-up meeting with his team and, of course, his boss. I wasn't particularly excited about it, but I agreed because I knew how much it meant to him. He'd been working really hard lately, and things at his job had been intense. So I thought, why not? One evening of polite smiles and small talk wouldn't hurt. The meeting went just fine at first. A few team members shared project updates, there was a bit of laughter here and there, and everything seemed pretty standard. I was quietly sitting beside my husband, sipping on my drink, occasionally nodding along when someone addressed me. His boss, Mr. Harris, was polite, well-dressed, and spoke with the kind of calm authority that made everyone listen. I'd met him once before, very briefly, but this was the first time I was actually around him for more than 5 minutes. He wasn't overly friendly, but he was charming in a way that didn't feel forced. The meeting wrapped up around 9 p.m., and that's when things took a turn I hadn't seen coming. My husband got an unexpected call from one of his clients, and he had to leave right away. He looked a bit torn. He didn't want to just leave me there, but the client was important and the matter sounded urgent. That's when Mr. Harris stepped in and offered to drop me home. At first, I hesitated. I mean, it felt a little awkward, being alone in a car with my husband's boss, but he insisted gently and said it was no trouble at all. I looked at my husband, and he nodded, thanking Mr. Harris. It's just a 25-minute drive, I told myself. What could possibly go wrong? As we walked to his car, the night felt colder than usual. I couldn't tell if it was the actual temperature or something else, maybe the sudden shift in how the evening was unfolding. I got into the passenger seat, and he started the engine. The drive began with silence, then a few polite questions. He asked how I found the meeting, if I liked the team, and how my husband was doing at home with the work pressure. It all seemed like harmless small talk, but there was something about his tone that made me feel uneasy. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was just the unfamiliar setting or the quiet hum of the car making me a little more aware of every word, every pause. Then, somewhere halfway through the drive, just as we hit a dimly lit stretch of road, the conversation shifted. He stopped talking about work and asked me something I never expected. It wasn't anything explicit, nothing you'd hear in a scandalous story, but it was personal. Too personal. He asked about my marriage. Not in the usual polite way, but more like he was fishing for something. "Are you happy?" he asked, keeping his eyes on the road. The question caught me off guard. I wasn't sure how to answer. Why would my husband's boss ask something like that? I laughed awkwardly and said, "Of course. We're doing great." But the way he looked at me at the next red light, it wasn't just casual curiosity. It was like he was looking for cracks, searching my face for doubt. And something about that made my stomach tighten. We continued driving, and although I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics, he kept circling back, as if he was trying to get under my skin, figure me out. His words weren't inappropriate, but the way he delivered them, it made me uncomfortable. And yet, part of me kept second-guessing. Was I just being paranoid? But then, just a few minutes before we reached my street, he pulled the car to the side. Not because of traffic. Not because of directions. He turned off the engine and looked at me, and what he said next left me frozen. I couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. My heart started racing, my hands clenched around the seat, and in that moment, I realized this ride home was not just a favor. It was something else entirely. And what happened in that car changed the way I saw everything. My husband, his job, even myself. But I'll tell you what he said and what I did in the next part of the story. Because trust me, what happened next, you won't see it coming. For a moment, I just sat there, staring ahead, pretending I hadn't heard him. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe he didn't really mean it the way it sounded. But when I turned to look at him, the expression on his face confirmed everything. It wasn't confusion or awkwardness. It was calm, controlled, and deliberate. Like he'd been planning to say it and was now watching to see how I would react. He didn't touch me or raise his voice. He didn't even smile. He just said it again, softer this time. I see things others don't. I know when someone's holding back. And you seem like you're holding a lot inside. My throat went dry. My hands were suddenly cold. I managed a tight smile and asked him what he meant. He just shrugged, still watching me. You don't have to keep playing a role just because people expect you to, he said. Your husband's great, sure. But are you happy with how everything's going? Or are you just going along with it because it's easier? It felt like the air had been sucked out of the car. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to say next. Part of me wanted to get out right there and call a ride home. But I didn't want to overreact. After all, he hadn't said anything outright offensive. But something about the way he said it, so casual, so confident, made me feel like I was being studied, like I was part of a test I hadn't agreed to take. To distract myself, I looked out the window. The streetlights were blurry through the glass, and the road was empty. We were just 2 turns away from my house, yet he hadn't moved. The car remained parked. Why did he stop? I wondered. What does he want from me? That's when my instincts kicked in. I didn't know what game he was playing, but I wasn't about to sit in silence and let him control the moment. I cleared my throat and said, I think you've got the wrong idea. I'm just tired. It's been a long day. I hoped that would be enough to shift the mood. But he didn't look convinced. Maybe, he replied. Or maybe no one's asked you the right questions in a while. Just then, my phone buzzed in my lap. It was my husband, texting to ask if I'd reached home yet. I quickly typed back that we were close. That small vibration from my phone suddenly reminded me who I was, why I was there, and how I needed to take control of the situation. I think we should get going, I said, a little more firmly this time. He didn't argue. He started the car without another word, and we drove the rest of the way in silence. But my heart didn't stop pounding. I kept going over his words in my mind, trying to understand what his intentions really were. Was he testing me? Trying to hint at something? Or was I overthinking the whole thing? When we finally pulled up in front of my house, I reached for the door handle before he could say anything else. But before I stepped out, he spoke again quietly without looking at me. You're smart. You'll think about it later when you're alone. Just remember I'm not the enemy. I got out without replying, closed the door gently, and walked toward the front porch. I didn't turn back. Not even once. But even inside the safety of my home, his words followed me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted that night. And the worst part? I didn't know if it was just him, or if he had unknowingly pointed out a crack in my life that I'd been trying to ignore. Over the next few days, I tried to move on like nothing happened. I told my husband the ride home was uneventful. He didn't ask many questions, and I didn't offer details. But I kept wondering, was Mr. Harris always like that with people? Or was there something specific he saw in me? The next time my husband brought up his boss's name at the dinner table, something in my chest tightened. It wasn't fear exactly. It was more like a sense of being watched, of being remembered. I didn't want to admit it, but a part of me wanted to know what he meant by his words. Did he see something I hadn't seen in myself? Or was it just manipulation dressed up as concern? One thing was clear. This wasn't over. That brief drive had opened a door that I didn't even know existed. And even though I wanted to close it and forget, something inside me kept going back, replaying every word, every pause, wondering what he really knew and what he was planning next. The days that followed felt strangely off, like I was living in a world slightly tilted out of place. My husband, Daniel, was busy with work as usual, always either on his laptop or talking on the phone, which made it easy for me to keep my thoughts to myself. But deep down, I was unsettled. I kept telling myself that Mr. Harris's words meant nothing, that maybe he was just trying to get into my head out of boredom or ego. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about them. The way he said, "You're smart. You'll think about it later," kept echoing. And I was thinking about it way more than I wanted to admit. At first, I tried to shake it off. I distracted myself with errands, met a friend for coffee, even started a small project at home I'd been putting off for months. But no matter what I did, my mind always drifted back to that car ride. And then, things started to get strange. Subtle, but noticeable. Daniel came home one evening and casually mentioned that his boss had asked about me. "Nothing serious," he said, "just a quick, 'How's your wife doing?' while they were wrapping up a meeting." But the way Daniel said it made me pause. Mr. Harris never seemed like the type to ask personal questions for no reason. Then came the texts. At first, it was one. Just a simple, "Hope you got home okay the other night." It was 2 days after the meeting. No signature. Just that one line. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't given him my number. He must have gotten it from the office database. I didn't respond. I deleted it. But a few days later, another came. "You looked distracted that night. Everything all right?" Now I was nervous. Not scared exactly, but there was a knot forming in my stomach I couldn't untie. Was he just being weirdly friendly? Was this how he tested people's boundaries? Or was this leading somewhere deeper? The mystery of his intentions kept tightening around me. I told myself again and again not to reply. And I didn't. But I couldn't help but feel watched, like every move I made was being tracked, quietly, from somewhere in the background. Around that same time, I started noticing something new in Daniel too. He seemed tense. More than his usual work stress. I caught him staring off during dinner, chewing slower than usual, or rubbing his forehead with a kind of pressure that looked more emotional than physical. One night, as we lay in bed, he asked me out of nowhere, "Do you think I'm doing well? Like, as a husband?" I turned to him, surprised, unsure where that was coming from. "Of course," I said. "Why are you asking?" He shook his head like it was nothing, but his eyes told me he wasn't convinced. That's when another thought began to form. What if this wasn't just about me? What if Mr. Harris was playing a bigger game? Something that involved both of us. He had power over Daniel's job, after all. And Daniel had always said the man was impossible to read, cold, distant, but always calculating. What if that drive home had been part of something more than curiosity? What if he was looking for leverage? I started watching Daniel more closely. His mood swings, the way he responded to work emails, even how he talked about his boss. I could tell he was holding something back, just like I was. But neither of us had the words to ask the other what was really going on. That silence between us grew slowly, filling the gaps where trust used to live. And still, I hadn't told him what really happened in the car. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found something in the pocket of Daniel's jeans, just a folded note. It wasn't addressed to anyone, and it wasn't signed. It said, "People are only loyal until they're given a reason not to be." That was it. Nothing more. My hands froze. I didn't know what it meant, or who it was for. But I knew, deep in my bones, that this story was just beginning. And I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. Not even the man I shared a bed with. For the next few days, that note haunted me. I kept it tucked inside a book on my nightstand, but my thoughts kept circling back to it like a warning I couldn't ignore. I didn't know if Daniel had written it, received it, or if it had accidentally ended up in his pocket. But its message, so blunt, so calculated, sounded too much like something Mr. Harris would say. The tension in the house grew heavier by the day. Every time Daniel walked through the door, I studied his face for signs of stress, of guilt, of anything that might give me a clue. But he stayed guarded. We were both acting like everything was normal, but I knew we were both pretending. Then came the dinner invitation. Daniel casually mentioned that Mr. Harris had invited us to his place for a small evening get-together. Just a few people from work, nothing formal, he said, trying to sound relaxed. But I saw the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. It wasn't really a request. It was an expectation. Declining would be noticed. And maybe that was the whole point. My stomach dropped. The idea of being around Mr. Harris again, under his roof, with no way to escape his presence or his words, made my heart race. But I said yes. I needed to see for myself what he was trying to do. Whether this was just a twisted game of power or something deeper. The night of the dinner, I dressed with extra care. Not to impress, but to feel like I had control. I told myself I wouldn't let him get into my head again. But the moment we arrived at his home, sleek, modern, with just the right amount of coldness, I felt the pressure return. Mr. Harris greeted us at the door, all charm and politeness, like nothing strange had ever passed between us. But I could feel it, the tension under the surface, the unspoken messages in every look. As the evening wore on, I started noticing things. Glances exchanged between Mr. Harris and Daniel. Moments where conversation stopped just a little too suddenly when I walked by. And then, during dinner, Mr. Harris raised his glass and said something that made my blood run cold. Some people are tested in quiet moments, he said, eyes fixed on me. Not with noise, but with silence. And how they handle it tells you everything. The room was quiet. I smiled, but inside, my pulse was racing. This wasn't a dinner. This was a trap. And I was right in the middle of it. I excused myself from the table, claiming I needed some air. My hands were trembling slightly, and I didn't want anyone to notice. I stepped out onto the balcony attached to the dining room, hoping to clear my head, but I barely had a second alone before the sliding door opened behind me. I turned, already knowing who it was. Mr. Harris walked out slowly, holding his wine glass, as if he just happened to need fresh air at the exact same moment. "You seem distant tonight," he said, his voice low and even. "Still thinking about our drive?" I didn't respond. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of knowing he was still under my skin. But then he took a step closer and added, I never told Daniel about our conversation. I assumed you'd prefer it that way." My chest tightened. It wasn't a threat, not directly. But the implication was clear. He was holding something over me, and now he was making sure I knew it. I looked him in the eye and asked, "What exactly do you want from me?" His smile didn't change. Not much. Just awareness. Loyalty. The kind that matters when things start shifting. I didn't understand what he meant until later that night. After we returned home, Daniel got a message on his phone. I saw the notification flash across the screen as he held it. A text from an unknown number with a single line, "Check her messages before you regret it." Daniel's face changed instantly, and in that moment, I realized the trap hadn't just been set for me. It had been set for both of us. Mr. Harris wasn't just testing boundaries, he was trying to break something. And whatever his endgame was, it had officially begun. Daniel didn't say a word that night. He placed his phone on the table, glanced at me briefly, and went straight to the bedroom. The silence between us was heavier than anything Mr. Harris had ever said. I knew I had to speak up before this spun further out of control. I walked in after him, heart pounding, and told him everything: the car ride, the strange texts, the unsettling conversations, and the feeling that we were both being manipulated. I expected anger, maybe disbelief. But instead, he sat quietly, absorbing every word. Then he opened his drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed emails and notes, some from Mr. Harris to upper management, some anonymous, but all pointing to one thing: Mr. Harris had been watching not just me, but Daniel too. He'd been setting Daniel up for a fall at work, building a quiet case against him, while also trying to get inside my head. "He's been using both of us," Daniel said, "to see who'd break first." That's when the real twist came. One of the emails wasn't from Mr. Harris. It was from someone in the company's board, warning Daniel privately. Turns out, they'd been suspicious of Harris's behavior for months. They knew he was manipulating employees, bending ethical lines, and using fear to control people. Our dinner invitation had been the final test, to see if Harris would go too far. The next morning, Mr. Harris was quietly removed from his position. No big announcements, just gone. And while the relief was real, the final twist still caught me off guard. The anonymous tip Daniel received? It wasn't from the board. It was from someone else entirely. A woman who had once been in my shoes and wanted to make sure I didn't stay silent like she had. After Mr. Harris was let go, a strange calm settled over our lives, but it wasn't the same as before. Daniel and I had been forced to face a lot, not just about his job, but about our communication, our trust, and the quiet cracks we hadn't noticed forming. We spent more time talking after that, not just about work or home responsibilities, but about how we'd been feeling all along. That night in the car had shaken something in me, but it also uncovered something important in our marriage: how easy it is to drift apart in silence. A few weeks later, Daniel received a formal apology from the board. They thanked him for staying professional and promised changes in leadership. It wasn't much, but it meant something. The company began implementing new policies to prevent abuse of power, and a few others who had been quietly suffering also came forward. That anonymous message had been a lifeline, not just for me, but for others too. I never met the woman who sent it, but I'll never forget what her courage gave me: clarity. The truth is, it wasn't just about a car ride or one man's manipulation. It was about what we choose to ignore, and how easily silence can become a trap. That night could have broken us, but instead, it revealed how strong we really were. And now, whenever I hear Daniel's phone buzz or pass by a quiet room, I don't feel fear. I feel thankful we faced the truth before it was too late.